by. We'll get her on in just a minute. She's probably covered more presidents than anyone else. And there she is, April Ryan. Welcome, April.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about one being with you mostly
Yeah,
because tonight we already know what's going to happen. But yeah,
exactly. And isn't it
yeah,
nice not to have to watch, you know who? Yeah, I
yeah,
know.
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Listen, how many presidents have you covered?
Well, five presidents, six presidencies, including Donald Trump now,
Oh,
because of the
twice.
split. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
You
because of
did
the split.
something bad in a former life, so you have to cover him twice. Now,
Yeah,
in all of those presidents, have you
yeah.
ever seen a scene like we saw on Friday with Zelensky in the Oval Office?
Never. When I saw it, I was in shock. These types of things, generally, if there is any kind of tension or angst, it's behind closed doors away from the press. And then we hear about it later on from like a President Biden who is talking to reporters at the pre-State of the Union luncheon or something like that. You know, when I talked to Putin, I said, don't you dare. I said, you said that? He said, why do you look at me like that? Because I'm shocked you said that. But to see this kind of tension, to see the vice president of the United States punch above his weight to speak to the president of Ukraine, chastising him, you're supposed to go you're equal, you're lateral when you address someone. I've
Yeah.
never seen anything like that. And then for a reporter to basically join in the tag team to say, where's your suit? Wartime president coming, trying to find peace and working on a minerals agreement, and then this. It. I was shocked, Jen. I was shocked. I was shocked. I was shocked.
And what do you make of Marco Rubio? He looks like that meme of Homer Simpson disappearing into the hedge. He wanted to disappear into that couch, I think. You've covered Rubio. I've covered Rubio. What do you think was going through his mind during that whole calamity?
He did better than he did during that rebuttal to the State of the Union speech,
Yes,
where
the
he had to stop
water, the
and grab
water.
the water. Right. He did much better. He's learning presentation matters. But you could tell Marco Rubio is a statesman. He's the man of diplomacy. He's also been on Capitol Hill. He understands the significance of that moment. And he was cringing himself, trying not to cringe, but the optics were just right in our face.
And, whatever his intentions, he's utterly powerless. No one thinks that he speaks for Trump because he's semi sane and Trump is sane not at all. What was interesting to me is how warmly the Europeans embrace Zelensky. They are
Yeah.
doing their best to get by without the United States. But have you ever
Yes.
seen a president in this short a time? We're only like, what, 5.5, 6 weeks into this presidency, offend as many allies? These aren't enemies that he's engaged, these are our allies.
You have to remember, Jen, the first presidency, the first term of Donald Trump was an experiment.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to figure that he was not a politician until he became a politician, right?
Yeah.
Until he became president. So the bottom line is this second term, he says, okay, I got a second term. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. I'm going to throw tradition out the window. I'm going to create the golden age. This is the golden age. It looks a little tarnished, but this is the golden age. And we are not aligning with our allies. We're aligning with those who are not necessarily, have not traditionally been our friends, and he's making them our friends.
Exactly. We also had the spectacle today of those tariffs going into effect. And if there
Yeah.
were statesmen on the world stage, they weren't in the United States, they were in Canada and in Mexico.
Yes.
Again, he seems to be doing things that are purposely destructive, either because he doesn't know any better or because he wants to be the big man. What do you make of this action? And knowing Donald Trump like you do, is he going to pivot, turn around, and back away, claiming some victory?
Well, Jen, let me tell you, the only way he will turn around and backtrack on this is if the public, the people who look like him, the people who voted for him come out strongly, not just in town halls, not just in the street, but competitively, repeatedly, and consistently. That's the only way because he's listening. Because think about this, he's now trying to backtrack a little bit on the federal mass firings. He's
Yes.
backtracking a little bit, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
He put Elon Musk out there in his hat without a suit, in his t-shirt. He's put him out there next to him to explain because people don't understand what Doge is, but they know Elon Musk is behind the hurt that they're going to feel and are feeling. So when people speak, and that's the thing, Jen, I don't think people understand the power that they have even in this moment. We, the people, still matter, and Donald Trump is still very much listening. Even if you don't think so, he does.
Yes, he does. And the other thing I think he does pay attention to is the markets. Remember how he was always chiding Biden every time the markets went down? Well, the markets have sunk about 1,200 points in 2 days. And that
Yes,
may make him very, very nervous as well. Let me switch to a moment for the people who are going to be watching him in that room today. We know some of the Democrats are not showing up, some will. The
yes.
Republicans, are any of them getting nervous? Are any of them beginning to show signs of wear and tear as all of this chaos is devolving?
Yes, many of them are, but they're not saying it publicly because for them, Donald Trump represents a threat to their political life,
Yeah.
a threat to anything that they want to do in Washington. And what you don't want is Donald Trump smearing you. And a lot of these politicians are very Harvard, Yale, what have you, and they've never seen street, and that's it, and they're scared of it, and that's just as plain as I can say it.
Yeah.
From Baltimore, I come from middle class, working middle class, but game peeps game. So I understand where he's going, but a lot of these people don't, and they're very afraid of it, and they don't stand up to him. I've never seen anything like this.
Isn't it amazing? And then some of them will quietly say, I'm afraid for my life or my family's life. Well, first of all, if they are, why aren't they publicly coming out to tell us this, that they are dealing with a full blown fascist? And if they're just getting a little antsy because of some online hate, welcome to the real world that everyone deals with. I can't tell which it is. What do you think?
So I'm going to say this. They know that a lot of what's going on is real. These threats are actionable. We saw
Yeah.
January 6th. Everybody said, oh, they're just trying to intimidate you. That wasn't intimidation. That was real. That was
Yeah.
fact. Yeah, so they realize the power that this man has, who happens to be the 47th president of the United States. So
Yeah.
therefore, they don't want to cross him, and they just quietly hold it in. They may have little whispers amongst each other, but they
Right.
don't make it known. Yeah.
Right, right. Um, as we reach the end of our time, I want to ask you a little bit about Elissa Slotkin. She made quite a splash when she was elected in 2018. I've been following her. I think she's a very impressive person. It was a smart choice. She comes from a swing state, former CIA agent. What's been your observation of her on the Hill so far?
Well, I mean, she's got a name, like you said, she's a freshman, but she has a lot of integrity going into this. And
Right.
that's what makes it so important and so impressive. So even though she's a freshman, she's someone, as you said, CIA, she knows intelligence. She understands what is happening domestically as well as foreign policy. A lot of this stuff, what people don't understand, is a national security issue from our health, from the health issues that the CDC and the HHS are being muzzled about talking about. There are measles, there are flus, COVIDs that are on the rise. They're not talking about it. But when people can't stand up and they're sick, that's a national security issue, especially in countries like Africa, but we're talking about here. But think about this. On the economic front, you're firing mass numbers of people. Financially, we are not as stable as we once were, like
Yeah.
maybe 3 months ago. Houses will be lost. People will, poverty. We're going to see poverty at a scale that we haven't seen. And in the DC and Maryland area, There's going to be not just recession, but the expectation is depression because of the numbers of federal employees. This woman can speak to this because she understands, she has a knowledge, a breadth that a
Right.
lot of freshmen won't have. So I'm looking forward to her powerful speech. I'm looking forward to the protests in the well of the House. I understand there may be some performances. I have to watch as a reporter, but I do believe this is going to be a speech that we've never seen before. I guarantee.
About that. Well, last question for you. What do you make, first of all, of the AP? They've had to go to court to sue because they were kicked out for refusing to use Gulf of America. And also the White House announcement that they are going to pick the pool, not the White House correspondents. What do you make of that? And has the press responded, do you think, strongly enough? Should we expect more protests, more action?
Well, I was a board member, so I understand the fight, and I appreciate them trying to have decorum, as some in the White House and the administration may not. But I want to see this White House Correspondents Association challenge this White House more so, instead of saying, "Well, this is not what we've done in the past, and this leads to state-run TV, etc." I want to see a little bit more. AP has been in the pool since the pool began. AP was there and the pool was there. The traditional press that's not biased, that tells you the facts, gives you the color, not being in a room talking about why is the president of another country not wearing a suit. But the people are in the pool. They have been the people who have been in the motorcade when John F. Kennedy was shot. They were the first ones to give those kind of critical details. That's why we're in the pool. We question presidents, but we also follow his every moment, because in those moments, if something happens, we are the ones to tell you what happened, and you can trust it. And now with the shift, changing the pool, making it their pool, you're not going to get that kind of fact-based knowledge. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for that, but it's the truth. Um, the color that we used to get will be skewed. It's unfortunate. And when it comes to AP, I want to see them back. We speak through their style book. We write through their style book. The traditions this president wants to throw away and create something new. And that new could actually bite him. So he's got to be careful with going so new versus going with tradition.
April, I don't think I've heard it explained as well or as passionately as that, which is why we have you here tonight. Thank you so much. I'll let you go to cover the speech, but thank you, and come back with us again. You are a true contrarian, and we love you.
I am. I am. Be well. Thank you.
You
Bye,
too.
Jen.
Bye bye. All right. So now we are going to bring on Jonathan Alter. And those of you who have followed us before may remember we had a few technical errors, but this time I think Jonathan is completely up to speed. We're going to add him in and hopefully he will appear momentarily. Yes, April is terrific, one of our readers says. Yes. Oh, I think we have Jonathan Alter. Jonathan,
Yeah.
you made it.
Hi, Jen. I'm
I'm
so
so
glad
delighted to see
that great to see you. And sorry about the tech glitch the last time I was on. I
you.
don't
Yeah,
know what happened. So,
exactly. So you've covered a lot of, this isn't really a State of the Union technically because it's his
right.
first speech, but you've covered a lot of these types of speeches. They're usually unifying, uplifting. They roll out an agenda. Sometimes they're a little long because they're so meaty and they're so detailed. Are we going to get that kind of speech from Donald Trump?
No, Donald Trump really only has one speed. You remember when he gave his acceptance speech at the convention last summer, everybody expected that he was going to be, this new toned down, sort of more uh, presidential candidate. And it started out that way when he talked about the assassination attempt. And then he just went into his stump speech
Right.
at such length that Republican delegates were falling asleep and leaving. So, by contrast, in 2017, when he gave his first speech to a joint session like tonight, he did seem kind of momentarily a little bit presidential. I remember resenting when some analysts called it presidential, but it at least passed for presidential. I don't think that's going to happen tonight. I think he's so unhinged that he'll work his way through, some of the things that have been written for him, bragging about, the fentanyl labs they've blown up in Mexico, bragging about some of these programs that they've cut that look on the surface to be wasteful to many Americans maybe. But then I think he'll quickly revert to type and in the Oval Office the other day in that just mortifying session with Zelensky, he
Yes,
started talking about stupid President Biden, like just things that presidents just don't
would never
say in
say.
public. And I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to be able to restrain himself. What I'm interested in is what the reaction of the Democrats is going to be. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping, and I think we'll know soon enough, that they don't clap and they don't stand up for him. Normally, you stand up out of respect for the office of the presidency, but he has so corrupted that
Yeah.
office in such a short period of time that he is not deserving of that level of respect. And I think, it's too late now, but I think more people should have done what AOC
Yes.
and Senator Chris Murphy are doing and just boycotted it. And if they had to do it over again, I think what the Democrats should have gotten together and say, if you're going to be here, then bring a guest, a veteran who is in the Veterans Administration who was
Right.
fired. I think Schumer is bringing one of those people. A number of others are, but basically have all the empty seats of maybe half of the members of Congress who boycotted
Right.
filled with these people who can testify to the horrific circumstances of the last
Yes.
6 weeks.
Some of
And
them
then I
will
also
agree.
thought,
Yeah.
just very
Yeah.
quickly, I think that um, Bill Kristol had an excellent idea today, which is not too late to do, which is to have 435 town meetings. If not this weekend, if it's too soon to organize it this weekend, which I don't really think it is, then next weekend. And in those districts where the seat is held by a Republican, just have some community leader,
Yes.
uh, maybe a nonpartisan person in that district to host the town meeting. But I think it would be a really interesting political moment to have
Yes.
435 town meetings going on at the same time on the same day.
I think that's a superb idea. And this comes about because the Republicans have now decided, oh, we have a solution when people come to
Good.
protest. We won't have town meetings.
Right,
They are
right.
hiding. So you're right. The natural inclination would then be, oh, well, see, we chased them away. Yay for us. But I think you're right. I think getting back out there, presenting themselves, and having people meet among themselves. One of the things I really tried to impress upon our contrarians is this has to be people driven. You see very articulate people at these town halls. They stand
Very.
up, they know what's going on. We should be hearing from those people, and so should the lawmakers. They shouldn't be allowed to hide out in their office someplace.
Imagine if we could develop a new tradition. And by the way, this is the time to break precedent. He has broken so many precedents. He has shattered so many guardrails that for the Democrats to just go, well, let's just, you know, cower, curl up in the fetal position, wait for them to screw up, and then, we'll get back into power because the economy will be so bad and egg prices will be so high. That's not going to get it done. We need some kind of new institutions. And I actually love the idea of maybe the first, well, since it's no longer the first weekend, well, it actually, well, maybe just say one weekend a month for the next 4 years, and maybe permanently, there
Yes.
will be a town meeting in every congressional district.
I think that's a
And if the
fabulous idea.
member of Congress, wants to show up and meet with his constituents, it's a great opportunity to do so. If he doesn't want to show up, the meeting will go on without him. It
Yeah,
takes us back to the town meeting tradition upon which this republic was founded.
absolutely.
The town meetings in New England before the American Revolution became the kind of model of community building and democratic accountability that the founders built on when
There,
they established our Constitution.
there is that great Rockwell painting where you talk about the four
Yeah,
freedoms, and there's the
yeah,
gentleman standing up, and he's at a town hall. And I think the other thing it does is it reminds people this is their democracy. You can't wait for the politicians. You can't
right, right.
wait for a savior. If we are going to do it, it's going to be in the town halls. It's going to be in the meeting houses. It's going to be at city council meetings, all over them. So I think encouraging a active public, an active political life for the country would be refreshing. And for God's sake, get people away from just doom scrolling and
Yeah,
complaining,
yeah, yeah.
whining. I think
People
one
are
of,
ready for this. Like they want to get out
yes,
of the house. They know that it's not good for their health to not be with other members of the community. They're not going to movie theaters anymore. They're watching movies at home. There's so little opportunity. Bowling alone was just the beginning of the problem
yes,
of community. And if you had, but the thing about these ideas is they can't be one offs.
right.
Like the Democrats have to announce we're doing this once a month. You can't do it once a week,
Yes,
once a month
right. And
for the foreseeable future. And
absolutely,
they will be amazed. The venues will get bigger and bigger.
I
And
agree.
and it will eventually be, go from these town meetings with members of Congress where they, when there's not that much going on, a couple of years ago, maybe just a few dozen people would show up. These will be big if this thing gets rolling in the way that it could. But you have to kind of lock yourself into it and say, we're going to do it once a month. Because if you don't do that, then, well, okay, we did it once or twice. Maybe
Right.
it wasn't so successful the second time. Not that many people showed up in my district. No, this is the drill. This is what we're doing. And if
Yes,
not that many people showed up in April in your district in whatever state, it's your job for the May
go
meeting
get them.
to make sure that they do, that
Yeah,
your constituents do show up.
there's
And I
a
think the
great
senators will start going to these as well.
there's a great example of this. If you remember, before the October 7 beginning of the war in Israel, there was a proposal by the right wing government to, in essence, neuter the judicial branch in Israel. And
Right.
what happened every Saturday night after Shabbat ended? People poured into the streets, hundreds of thousands of people
Right.
in a tiny country, and they met every Saturday night for like 38, 39, 40 weeks before the war interrupted it. It was the most amazing patriotic display. They wrapped themselves in Israeli flags. That's what true patriots have to do. They have to come out to protest, to make their voices hear, and to embrace, to take back those symbols of patriotism, of unity that Trump has snatched away, has tried to keep for himself. And we really need to recover that sense of passion and that sense of national unity, national identity. I think this is a tremendous idea.
What I like about this idea is that, yes, we have in our Constitution the right to peaceably assemble, and peaceful protest is extremely important. But what happens with demonstrations is it all becomes about how many people did you get out?
Right.
And the bar keeps going up. Oh, well, they had 100,000 out the last. This time they only had 50,000. And the whole thing becomes about meeting the expectations of how many people are in the streets. And when you're in the streets, you're not having the kind of civic dialogue that we need to
Yeah,
rebuild these
it's a great
connections
point.
to each other. And so I think this it actually shouldn't be billed as protest events. It should be billed as civic conversations.
I,
And, if the Republican members have any balls, they'll show up and talk to their constituents and
exactly.
show that they're tough and that they can stand the heat and they can answer the questions. But what the people who show up have to do is hold up their end of the bargain, which is to be civil,
Yes,
and not just rage,
exactly.
use these meetings to rage, to actually ask questions, have every, try to
Exactly.
establish some not hard and fast rules because they'll vary a little bit by district, but to try to structure it so that what is your question, and if you can
Yes,
have a passionate basis for your question, great. But don't just get up there and make a speech because people don't like to hear
right.
their neighbors making
Right.
speeches. They're
And I would
happy to see their neighbors asking questions. There's a big
exactly.
difference,
And I would say to this that Democrats have to make sure that they are open to having Republicans there. The point is not to just have a
Absolutely.
bunch of Democrats talking to
Right.
one another, it's to
Right.
be polite, to be inclusive. And I have found that sometimes we expect that people who have been marinating in Fox News for 10, 15 years will somehow the light will click and suddenly they'll understand it's all been a lie. It's only through dialogue, through
Right.
persistent introduction to the facts with people they know, people they like, that you may begin to make some inroads. They may begin to question what's happening in their news bubble. And if you can do that, then we begin a saner kind of conversation, a saner kind of politics. Now,
So there's
speaking of numbers, I see that we are 10,000 strong. So if we can get 10,000 people on
yeah.
a Tuesday night, I'm sure people can get several thousand.
Well, maybe
I,
the 10,000, people watching can tell their member of Congress, look, we want
absolutely.
this
We want a
monthly
meeting.
town meeting. We want the monthly
Exactly.
town
We
meeting model, to
absolutely.
be
We
implemented.
have contrarians all over the country, and now you have something to do. You guys always ask us, what should we do? Here's something for you to do. Let's close it out on this note, Jonathan. When you think back of all the presidents that you've covered, you've written about, you're really one of the greatest living experts on Jimmy Carter. What is the most central facet that we really, central quality that we really should demand of presidents? What is the one singular quality that in the future we should never sacrifice, we should never put aside because the price of eggs are too high or because we disagree on a policy or two? What's the value that we should be looking for in presidents?
So, one of the things that is so upsetting about this evening is you're seeing Donald Trump despoiling the chamber, the seat of our government, with what he's done. And I think back to other speeches that have been made there. And you mentioned the four freedoms. So, Franklin Roosevelt said, the four freedoms were freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear.
Yes.
And then he added everywhere in the world. Now, what do those and other of FDR's remarks suggest? And this is, my first book was about FDR and his first 100 days. And the defining moment, as I called it, is now happening in reverse. So we're getting
Yes.
a different kind of defining moment, and everything is kind of Roosevelt on opposite day.
Exactly.
But Roosevelt at one point said the presidency is preeminently a place of moral leadership. And that doesn't mean that, our presidents are never going to lie. They're all going to lie. They're politicians. They're not humble. Even Jimmy Carter wasn't truly humble. No politician is, right? They're going to make mistakes. They're going to get us into wars that we shouldn't be in. But they need to project a sense not only of decency, but of what America means. And at root, that is a moral appeal. And so the president should be the repository of a sense, maybe not of his personal morality. You could say, Bill Clinton wasn't a personally moral person. You can make those judgments, but the embodiment of a moral idea of us as a nation. And this is what is so dispiriting
Yeah.
and disturbing about what's going on, is that not only is Donald Trump a person of poor moral character, but he's making it seem as if the character of our
Yes.
nation is wanting.
Yes.
So the next president must be somebody who understands this moral imperative, whatever the particular policies are, and to get into greater consonance with our Constitution. And you mentioned my experience with presidents. I've interviewed 9 of the last
Wow.
10 American presidents,
Wow.
either before, during, or after they left the presidency. In the case of Trump, it was many years before he was president. And
Wow.
in the case of Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon, it was after. Some others like Clinton and Obama, Bush, it was during, right? So there's a range of the times
Right.
at which I spoke to these presidents. That many of them despised each other personally. They didn't have, a lot in common politically. But even Nixon, they believed in
Yeah.
the American idea
Yes.
and the notion that they would change sides and go with the bad guys.
Yeah.
Even Nixon with détente, yes, he wants détente with the Soviet Union, but he's not going over to Brezhnev's side.
Yes.
He's not going over to Mao Zedong's side.
Right.
And this is what's happening now, and it's mind-blowing, and we have
It
to
is.
do everything we can to resist it.
That is a beautiful sentiment. So well said, as always, Jonathan. And let's leave it on that we should all aspire to, first of all, seize our citizenship, seize our responsibility as members of an active democracy, and demand more, demand moral leaders. Now, if all of you contrarians really want to, you can go watch you know who on TV, or as Bill Crystal also said, that's why God made transcripts, so you didn't have to listen to him live. But if you want something fun, go to our Substack right now and click on our POTUS feature. You're going to see a different kind of POTUS, and it's going to make you laugh and it's going to make you smile. So I wish you all a very good night, whichever choice you make. And thank you again, Jonathan, for being with us. It's been a pleasure as always. We'll see you next time.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon, Jen. Bye-bye.